Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Good Decisions podcast, which is ModelOp's AI Governance Insights podcast. And I am your host, Jay Combs, the VP of Marketing here at ModelOp. And with me today is our guest, Christina Morandi, who is the Director of Customer Success at ModelOp and works with all of our customers and is very familiar with all the different kind of trends and things that are happening in the world of AI governance. Welcome, Christina.
Hey, Jay. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you. The last time, or in our first episode of Good Decisions, we talked about risk tiering and why is that important to AI governance. And we started talking about how risk tiering does ultimately impact the different model life cycles and workflows that we have. We didn't really have time to get into what that is or why it's important. So that's what we're going to talk about today, model life cycles. So let's get into it. And we'll start with a really straightforward question. What is a model life cycle and why is it important?
That's a great question, Jay. It's also a loaded question because we need to be on the same page as far as what is a model, right? So, we like to cast a wide net when we're talking about models. So we refer to a model as any like AI initiative or any like statistical, mathematical, or kind of rules-based decision-making model. And so like some examples could be as simple in regards to model, something as simple as a spreadsheet with some calculations, or something more complex like a machine learning model of machine learning models of various complexities. These could be like in-house models that are built for purpose, or vendor models, or generative AI, LLMs, LLM models, neural nets. The list goes on and on and on, right? Again, so in regards to models, we just trying to cast a wide net here, because each one of those model types, regardless how simple they are or how complex they are, especially when we're talking about like ensemble models with multi steps, each regardless of the complexity of the model, it's really important to have a model life cycle in place. And the model life cycle is basically just the workflow, right? That model goes through from ideation to retirement. It's all of the steps that model has to go through, from development and testing to monitoring controls and reporting. Basically, anything that you're going to do with that model, you want to make sure you understand.
Got it. And why does a business need that? Everything you made logically makes sense, but why is that important to a business? And more broadly, why is it important to the larger enterprise?
Modeling and AI initiatives typically aren't cheap, right? Everything around, developing these models or purchasing these models, right? It's expensive. And so we really need to have a plan in place in order to get the most value out of those investments. And there's also a lot of risk around models. Could be the model itself, could be how the model is being used, what the exposure is of the model. We talked about this a little bit. You guys talked about this a little bit on your last podcast in regards to defining risk tiers. And so if you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with higher risk models, you want to make sure you have a full grasp of the requirements that need to be in place in order to be able to work with that model. So again, it's really important for businesses to get a handle on what the full model lifecycle is as soon as possible, so they can make sure that they can actually use that model in the real world, that it's going to be compliant, it's not going to cause any issues, and that while it's in operations, it's not causing any issues. And then you have the steps in place in order to be able to put those controls the controls for monitoring, reporting in place.
Got it. And so what you said, you had a couple terms in there, like requirements, controls, regulations. So is it fair to say that a big part of this is making sure that, especially across a large enterprise, we might have different teams using different tools, doing things differently, trying to create consistency for compliance with regulations or internal policies, so everybody's on the same page and enforcing kind of the rules and regulations in a consistent way across the whole enterprise?
Correct. So you want to be consistent for the model types that you're investing in. And so, for example, if there is policy in place that is relevant to a generative AI model that you're using because it is customer facing or client facing,
High risk, if you will.
Yeah. High risk, right? Then it's really important that you're governing all of your Gen AI and LLM models not only comprehensively but consistently.
Got it. And that's kind of the type, I guess, to the risk tiering. You might have high, medium, low risk defined differently. and different model types or initiative types might have different checks and balances they need to go through. So it's not certainly not a one size fits all, but consistency, having that risk-based approach is real important to the workflows themselves.
Yeah, a lot of our customers, they'll start with that risk tiering in order to define the model lifecycle steps per risk tier. Because the steps, the controls, the monitoring controls and reporting requirements that need to be put in place are typically associated with that risk tier.
So interesting. So it seems like this can get pretty complex with low, medium, high risk model. So can you give us some insight into, like, in the real world, where these life cycles get complex for organizations and what impacts those have?
Yes. So there's two areas of complexity. One, as you can imagine, is obvious, right? It's the model life cycle itself can get pretty complex depending on all of the controls and monitoring that need to be in place. There might also be some validation and review steps in there that require different groups of people to be involved in that model life cycle. And as the investments in AI increase, as more AI is getting developed or purchased within our customer environments, we're seeing more complexity as well in requirements for a variety of reasons. So anyways, for example, like a year ago, our customers on average would have model life cycles with 12 to 20 steps max, right? And now we're seeing model life cycles with 300 plus control points. So just to give you an idea of the complexity there. So when we're talking about that many control points, we're talking about that many steps within the model life cycle, managing that through manual processes, through spreadsheets, through individually emailing people in order to get their input. It really becomes more difficult, which is one of the reasons why a lot of our customers have prioritized their higher risk models, right? As far as getting them, governed and managed as quickly as possible. Now, so we talked about the model lifecycle complexity specifically, but the other aspect that we need to consider is the actual volume of models, right? So just as, a year ago, maybe, most of our customers were dealing, had a dozen models that they'd been developing for a while, in-house models. With the rise of GenAI and LLMs and vendor models, and just AI being used for more purposes, our customers that may have had to manage 12 models a year ago are now managing hundreds of models. So you can imagine how difficult it gets to handle a model life cycle for hundreds of models with hundreds of control points using manual processes. It pretty much managing these workflows manually we're at a point now where it's just not possible without automation.
Yeah, it sounds almost overwhelming, because this isn't just like a data science team issue, right? We're working with compliance, risk, legal, infosec, data privacy, various other teams that need to be involved with the enforcement and review validation of the models that are going through. So, and it's going to be changing, right? Like, as more regulations are coming online every week, it seems like at this point, it's just a massive scale problem. And so, yeah, I can see why this is so challenging. So can you maybe take us into, how do you scale this? How are we going from 10 to 300 model ideas and running them through these lifecycle workflows? How do you even get started with that? Like, so how do you get started, and how are folks doing it today?
So having the right tools in place is really important. As I mentioned, you have to be able to automate a lot of these steps, especially around the monitoring piece, the controls piece, testing and validation, ongoing reviews, as you mentioned, and other, risk management reporting components. You have to be able to automatically integrate with other systems and kick off different processes and notify individuals if there are still manual processes.
Like, what kind of systems, just out of curiosity?
Just any of the systems that are used in order to manage the model, like any ticketing systems that
Like a
you
Jira, Confluence, or something like that?
Yes, correct. And then obviously from a communication standpoint, the emailing, being able to be able to automate emails. And then there's from a monitoring perspective, the way that we're monitoring our models is getting more complex and more varied as well. So being able to integrate with different systems, or be able to ingest those monitoring calculations and approaches, that's also something that being able to put that all into one place and automate it will help from a scaling perspective.
Yeah, so IT systems, data science, machine learning tools. Got it. So I guess,
It can be an integration nightmare, right?
it sounds like, I mean, yeah, you're basically trying to work with an existing tech stack and do the communication around it, know who's responsible for what, when it's their turn, making sure nothing slips through the cracks, especially with something that's high risk, is really, really intense and concerning, and probably keeps people up at night.
Yeah, and it's a symptom of, again, more and more teams using AI, investing in AI, and the need for there to be disparate systems. Whenever you have a need for there to be disparate systems, you have a need for more complex integrations, right? And so having manual processes in place really doesn't work for that, or having tools in place that are vendor locked and specific to very specific model types, that may not work with a broader investment in AI across a broader set of model types and model tooling.
So there's a lot of complexity here, certainly at different risk levels. So when do you, as an enterprise or somebody who's involved with model life cycles, when do you get started, I guess, kind of documenting the policies and trying to figure out what that life cycle and control should look like?
Well, you want to figure out what your requirements are and how you're going to use your model as soon as possible. And the answers that you obtain there will result in your in the steps of your model life cycle. So it's really important to
So right away is basically the answer. Like as soon as you come up with the idea, you're thinking about the life cycle.
Exactly. You want to think about it right away, because at the end of the day, you don't want to spend all of this money investing in in-house developing in-house models or paying for third-party models and then not be able to use those models because you didn't have like a proper workflow in place in order to be able to properly monitor, manage, and control those models according to the policies that those models have to adhere to. So the sooner you figure out what the model lifecycle looks like, the sooner you can start moving your model through that model lifecycle, and you can start getting value out of your model and out of your investment.
That makes a lot of sense. So you start right at the beginning. Right away is when you want to start documenting and preparing the process, which then begs the next question, because that can feel daunting. How do you actually get started? What's the starting point?
So everybody starts at the same spot, right? Everybody has to understand what the requirements are, what the policy is specific to their model, and what the steps need to look like, right? And that is probably the most daunting task. And that is why at ModelOp, we have spent a ton of time researching the latest policies and guidelines. For example, the EU AI Act, both high risk, low risk, SR 11.7, NIST standards. I mean, you name it. Like, we live and we breathe researching these policies so that we can extract the requirements from those policies into templates and give our customers a place to start that isn't so daunting, right? And so I think everybody who is focused on building model life cycles and making sure that their model investments are adhering to the latest policies, everyone should be building up a library, right, of templates that they can just pick up based off of the latest policies, how they're going to use their model, what the risk tier is, to have a place to start, and then also build a standard, right, for each. Because at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, it's all about how quickly can we get, and we're going to sound like a broken record here, how quickly can we get a return on our investment, right? How quickly can we see value, and how quickly can we start using the insights from our models used operationally?
Got it. It makes a lot of sense too. And not just, I think, like, certainly the value and the ROI is important, but also that risk mitigation piece of making sure, which is tied to the value, obviously, making sure that everybody's using and enforcing the same policies and regulations, especially across like a large enterprise. Everybody's on the same page and it's consistent, which makes going to market more efficient, which ultimately leads to better ROI. So you're working with leaders at Fortune 500 companies every day, implementing these model life cycles, understanding the policies and regulations that need to be enforced. What key lessons or insights have you collected from this experience that you wish anybody getting started in their AI governance journey and starting to define the processes around model life cycles should know?
So yeah, we're still learning every day. But some key takeaways are you don't want to start from ground zero. You want to use templates around the latest policies that are relevant to the models that you're working with. You want to use templates as much as possible. You want to use out-of-the-box metrics and monitoring as much as possible. Again, you want to use what you have, and if you have something like a template around a specific policy available to you, like we offer at ModelOp, you want to take advantage of that. And you also want to be really smart about prioritizing the model life cycles that you're defining. And so, a lot of our customers will jump right into their highest risk, highest exposure models to get a handle on and have proper controls and monitoring in place off the bat to reduce their exposure, reduce their risk, and continue to see value from those higher risk models or higher exposure models. Automation is also this may be obvious, but the faster you can move through your governance processes, the faster you're going to see your return on investment.
I don't understand without automation how this would be possible at an enterprise level, especially with the volume of models and the complexity. It seems like you're just asking for trouble without having a consistently defined, enforced process that's done through automation.
Right. And we work with a lot of customers who have tried to throw people at this problem and have been unsuccessful. And so, yeah, I mean, automation is really key to be able to ensure that the processes in place are followed and they are standardized and they are transferable and they can exist without the need for a specific individual or a specific organization. So another thing that we haven't really touched on yet, a best practice is having defined model life cycles, having defined governance processes for all of your models. So we talked about making templatizing, we talked about prioritization, we talked about automation, but there's a visibility piece in there as well that becomes really impactful to make sure that you are implementing your governance processes consistently across all of your models, across all of your groups that are investing in using models.
Got it. So automation is obviously very important, but another thing I'm curious about, if I'm an executive or a leader at an enterprise, and I'm maybe not in the weeds of the individual steps of a model life cycle, how do I get visibility, or how do I understand how compliant we are with certain regulations, or how at risk we are with certain issues? Is there a way to report or quickly give insight to leaders in an enterprise based on where all the different model life cycles are across the organization?
Yeah, so you really need to have a report at the end of the day on all of your model life cycles. It tells you how many models you even have running, what those models are doing, what their compliance score is, and I think we're going to talk about this one on the next podcast, but having this concept of a governance score that measures the health of your models is key. So it's one thing to understand the model process, the model life cycle itself. It's one thing to be able to implement that process consistently. It's another thing to be able to get the full view of everything running. And before ModelOp, a lot of our customers couldn't answer those basic questions like, how many models do I have running? What are those models being used for? What is the risk associated with these models? What is the exposure? And so we've invested a lot of resources into being able to answer those questions.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a great place to stop. Covered a lot of ground today on model life cycles. And you're right. I think in the next episode, we're going to start talking about some of those reports, the AI governance score that you just mentioned, because there's a lot more to dig into on that front. So, Christina, thank you for the insight today. Thank you for joining us. And I hope to have you back on the podcast again. Any final thoughts? Any final words?
No, this is really fun. And, if I haven't said it enough on this podcast, nobody should be starting from ground zero here. Nobody should be sending emails manually or filling out really complicated spreadsheets. So we can do better than that.
Awesome. Great to hear. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We'll be trying to come out with new content on a weekly or regular basis, and look forward to chatting again on the next one. Bye, everybody.